With rotation happening and the Journey Together pack coming out, a lot has changed in the Pokemon TCG meta, and I wanted to talk about 5 cards that I feel like you should fit in your deck if your deck allows you to. Obviously, not every deck's going to be able to do this, but these are the 5 cards that I've found when building basically any deck that I'm trying to fit all of these in, or at the very least like 4 of the 5 of these cards. So let's get into it. But first, actually, if you like this TCG content, let me know down in the comments down below, and don't forget to subscribe. I would appreciate it. I want to make more TCG content, and I feel like I've been getting good enough that I feel like I can now with like relative expertise, even though obviously I'm not like a great player, but I know what I'm talking about. I've played TCG for, you know, a long time, like many years. I've like have 8 years of card game experience, so I feel like I'm relatively qualified to talk about deck building. So let's go with the first card. The first choice that I feel like is so important right now, it's actually one of 2 cards, which is going to be Iono or Judge. I feel like hand disruption is ridiculously important in this meta. You are going to have one of the biggest engines in the game right now is the Hoot Hoot Noctowl line. So if you see them or your opponent turn 1 go for a Fan Rotom, get a couple Noctowls, get a Hoot Hoot, being able to Iono or Judge that away will immediately make the game into your favor no matter what is happening. If you still lose after that, they got the nuts, they drew it, they're God, they're better than you, GG's. But I really feel like hand disruption right now is so important. Even last format, a lot of the people at my locals were starting to play post-rotation stuff, and I played Miraidon, which is not normally a deck that runs Iono, but I literally ran 1 because if they go first and I'm able to get, you know, in this case like Luminion for Iono, or if you just raw rip the Iono, you instantly win the game. And I won multiple games, even versus Dragapult players that are like, I'm gonna Lance to get multiple things for next turn, or I guess it would be like Jacques or whatever, you know, in post-rotation, because there's a lot of stuff that's like, I'm gonna set up this for next turn, and you kind of just hold it, because obviously you want to use like a support, you might as well use a supporter, right? And I feel like the hand disruption is just so ridiculously powerful right now, and I don't see a way that you can get away with a deck not running hand support or hand disruption unless you are just like the best deck ever. Dragapult likes doing it because they like to search for things, you know, for like to get their Dragapults, to get their Dracloaks. You of course have, as I mentioned, like all of the Noctowl line decks. Of course you have Terra Box, you have, or I call it Ogre Box because it's more fun like that. I know that Raging Bolt, that's the deck I'm running, by the way, he wants to run the Hoot Hoot Noctowl line as well. And there's just so many decks right now that just search for something. Even like Archaladon, right? They're like Ultra Ball for Archaladon, or like have multiple things in their hand, or like the Dubwool that you're just ready for them to have, and then you can just Iono it away and make the game significantly more difficult for them. Or again, Judge. I don't really know why you would run Judge over Iono other than you always get a guaranteed set of cards when you are in late game. So I guess maybe that's the reason why it's potentially better, but I personally always just prefer Iono because you for sure make them not have it again, because I think Judge shuffles it back into the deck, so technically they could draw those cards again. So I think Iono was just better, but I know that people run Judge and I don't quite understand why, so I'm giving you the option of one of both. The second card I wanted to talk about is Jamming Tower. First off, stadium replacements are so important right now. You of course, if they're gonna run the new decks, like the Hops deck has their stadium, the Ends deck has their stadium, but of course, again, big thing, Terra Box is going to be running the Area 0, and you basically just want the ability to shut off those stadiums in general, but Jamming Tower in specific is important because tools are ridiculous right now. If you are fighting against the Lilies deck, of course, you want to shut off those Lilies Pearl so you can take your 2 prize cards. If you're fighting against Terra Box, you want to be able to shut down their Crystal, which will make it significantly more difficult for their Water Ogerpon or even their Pikachu to be able to attack. And I feel like slowing down decks for like a single turn basically just helps you win the game, because if they're able to, you know, get multiple attacks with Pikachu in a row because they just have the Crispin and the Energy Switch and the Grass Energy, then like that's going to be difficult. And of course they can string those together very well because of the Noctowl engine if you weren't able to disrupt it before. But I do think the Jamming Tower really helps. I'm actually running in my Raging Bolt deck, I am running Bravery Charms because I feel like the extra damage is, or the extra HP is super important, but I am still running a Jamming Tower in there as well as an Area 0 for, you know, helping expand my bench, but also I can get rid of some liabilities later in the game. Like I can get rid of my Noctowls against like a Dragapult that's trying to snipe extra damage for their KOs. But again, the jamming tower is just so important because you just have the ability to shut off Sparkling Crystal, which in my opinion is huge. Bravery Charms in something like my deck, or even against Gardevoir, shutting down their Bravery Charms so that you can either get, easy KOs and then be able to attack something different, or they just won't be able to get those big hits with their Drifloon or with their Scream Tail. I really feel like the jamming tower is just so key. And again, being able to just bump stadiums is ridiculously important right now. Again, especially the Area 0, because you're going to make the resources for things like Terra Box a lot more difficult. I don't know what stadiums the stall decks all play. I'm not sure if they run, the things that make the retreat costs higher, or exactly what lists they are running. I haven't really run into that much stall. Or when I did, I was playing Miraidon, and I'm just killing things with Ampy very much. It doesn't really matter. Like I'm bossing up, for alligators and stuff like that, and it wasn't difficult. But now post, me playing Miraidon, I haven't played it very much, so I could maybe be wrong about that one. I don't know how many stadiums wall decks play, but I feel like jamming tower is still just so important. You can shut off the Hero's Cape, the Luxurious Cape that I know people run on the Mimikyus to make that a little bit harder to get rid of, which it is 170 on a Mimikyu is a lot. So I know that people are doing that. It is very nice just to be able to shut things off, and jamming tower is, in my opinion, just a key. If you can just run a one of, I think it is so clutch, especially if you are able to search it. If you are running something like the Colress's, I forget which one it is, but the Colress that searches like an energy and a stadium, or if you're having your secret box, if that's your ace spec, or again, if you're running that Noctowl Hoot line, you can just be like, hey, I'm going to shut off things and I'm just going to search it, which again, I feel like the Hoot Noctowl line is just so insane. So being able to search your stadiums, very good. The third one, honestly, this might be the most important one. Maybe Iono's more important, but this one is ridiculously important. I think you need to run multiple switch cards in your deck. Obviously, we are losing switch cart to the rotation, but I think just running straight up switch is ridiculously important right now. There are so many decks that are trapping you in the active. Obviously, the main two would be, Ogre Box with their Sob ability for the Water Ogre Pawn, and then of course you have the Feraligatr deck. That's like half of what it does, is just kind of keep you in the active with, I think that's the Croconaw attack. I don't remember if it's the Croconaw or the Total Dial attack that keeps you in the active for 80 damage after they use their Feraligatr ability, and then just leave you there and they monkey dory things around, and it can be very annoying. I think switch is stupid important right now because there are so many effects that just lock you in place. Especially there's a lot of decks right now that have relatively high retreat costs as well with things. Like I know I've gotten trapped a couple times with my Raging Bolt and I haven't been able to get a Latias, or I haven't been able to get my, Slitherwing out of the active because I just don't have the energy for that, and suddenly I draw a switch or I search for a switch with my Noctowl line, and it's just so good. I think it is so important. I think that being caught in the active, counter captured up or bossed up and then put in the active and trapped there it's really good right now. I mean, it was really good before, but I feel like there were just ways to get around it, or so many cards that it didn't really matter. You would find things anyway, but I feel like it's so important right now, as well as, of course, if you are running the Noctowl line, that means you can also potentially run a Ditto, because you can actually not necessarily start the Ditto. You start the Fan Rotom, then you switch the Ditto in, get its ability, and then retreat with whatever it was anyway, or you normal retreat something, get the Ditto in, change it, and then switch into whatever you actually wanted in front. But I think it is so important right now to have multiple switch cards. It can be 2 switches, it can be a switch, and if you don't have the ace spec chosen necessarily, you can pick Prime Catcher. I think it is really important right now to just have multiple switches, because getting caught in the active, especially with how prevalent Monkey Dory is everywhere, with all the stall decks, with all of the everything, you need to just be able to make sure you can get the cards that you want in your active. Otherwise, you're gonna have a bad time. This fourth one, I feel like, is a lot more specific in terms of what decks can use it, but I feel like if you can fit it in, it is so good, which is Professor Turo's Scenario. Obviously, it was good last format. A lot of people know how powerful this card is to, either, like a switch card, get your something out of the active and then not be trapped there, because then you have the mobility since you are no longer trapped in the active. It can get damage off of your Pokemon, it can get energy off your Pokemon, so you have more access to it in the discard, especially for something like Gardevoir is super important. I think that this card is just really good because, again, there's a lot of little damage Monkey Dory stuff happening right now, and so being able to just lift a Pokemon that has 170, 180 damage and then just replay it, especially if it's not an evolution, is really important right now in my opinion. I'm struggling to find room for this in my deck personally, so I don't think I'm gonna run this one, but that's because I'm running literally all of the other things that I already listed, and it's just a little bit difficult for me to find the room. But again, I feel like there are so many decks right now that benefit from this. Obviously, Archala Chaladon benefited from it before, Gardevoir benefited from before, so did Dragapult, so there's a lot of decks that are going to be using it. I don't know if Ogre Box is going to be using it. That deck list is pretty tight, and I don't think they have the room for it. But again, not having the room for it means, hey, I know that if I have damage on those Pokemon, that I'm not going to struggle to, you know, actually finish the job, other than, you know, normally struggling to finish the job against that deck because it's very good. But like, you're not going to have extra difficulty, but especially if you have high damage, like stage 1 or stage 2s, sorry, high HP stage 1 or stage 2s, it can be really, really pivotal in a game to just bounce it once. I don't know if bounce is the terminology in Pokemon. That was the terminology in Yu-Gi-Oh! To put something back into your hand. But it is so, so good. If your deck can afford it, it can really change the momentum, because a lot of people are, again, trying to like trap things with energy on it, and not let you, you know, have access to that energy in the discard, which again happens sometimes against Gardevoir or against our Chaladon. And again, even against something like Dragapult, where you have so much health and people need normally multiple turns in order to kill a Dragapult, if you're able to just be like, oh, you didn't kill it? Cool, do it again. I think that is just so powerful, and it is really, really difficult to get around a lot of times. It can literally just spell game. If you have a Turos and they don't interrupt your hand, it's like, cool, no matter what happens, I win because this card is busted. So if you are able to put that in your deck, I definitely recommend it. And finally, especially because multiple of these cards were supporter cards, I think that you should, if you can, fit in a PAL pad. I think PAL pad is just so important right now because you have multiple attempts to use the supporters, right? Obviously, you know, it's very common in decks like Raging Bolt because you want to just be using Sada every single turn. But I do think it's also important even in decks like Ogre Box because you know, can't really run too many copies of things like of all your supporters just because you're running so many. And especially if you are trying to fit in like an extra Iono or an extra Crispin, you know, maybe instead of the extra of the supporter, you can just go, okay, well, here's a PAL pad, and you know, you just hope that you don't draw the PAL pad at the beginning, and that would be like your second or third supporter that you find. Because I just think PAL pad is super important because you are just able to cycle your resources back. So people that are like counting like, okay, well, you've used 2 Crispins or 2 Sadas or even 3 Sadas and you discarded one because you like Squawk ability or something. Like, it makes the counts a lot harder to keep track of, and especially in a best of 3 format, knowing like, oh man, I might have to deal with 5 or 6 of the same supporter if it's like a 4 of supporter, like a Sada or an Arvin in like a Miraidon deck, which granted Miraidon's not good anymore, so you know, it's different. But you know, there's plenty of decks I feel like that it's just like, oh, they used like their 1 or 2 bosses, I'm good for the rest of the game, and then they like PAL pad and you're just like, oh no, everything is hard now. So I do think PAL pad is just super important, again, if you are able to find the space for it. And yeah, that is going to be the 5 cards I really think you should try to fit in all of your TCG decks if you want the highest chance of winning. Obviously, there's definitely meta decks that you can just yoink the deck lists for, and I don't know exactly what's running everything. I'm not keeping that close track of it. I'm just kind of playing a lot on TCG Live, and you know, I still do watch some of the tournaments. Like, I watch like regionals and stuff, but obviously the rotation hasn't happened, and I don't often watch the Japanese tournaments. I did watch the Players Cup, but again, I don't remember the lists super well, and I feel like I've, you know, in the last like month and a half, I've gotten a lot better at like theories of deck building, and even just playing the game, I feel like I've kind of broke a plateau, which is why I'm a little more comfortable to talk about the game actually, and not just be like, this is gameplay in terms of videos. So yeah, thank you all for watching. Let me know what other cards you think people should be playing right now. As always, social media and partner stuff is down below, and let me know if you like the Pokemon content, and I'll see you all next time. Peace.